All right, today what we're going to be doing is we are going to be starting chapter 9, which is right triangle trigonometry. And if you recall from algebra, we learned a little bit about right triangle trigonometry um, with sine, cosine, and tangent. All right, so what we're going to do is this chapter, we're going to focus on those ideas that you were introduced to in algebra, and we're just going to expand on them some more. All right, so specifically today, all we're going to focus on is the tangent ratio. Now, if you recall, we do have some terms here that we need to do to label our triangles. We have the hypotenuse, the adjacent, and the opposite. Well, we know the hypotenuse of any triangle is the side that is opposite the right angle, so that's pretty easy enough. Now, the adjacent and the opposite sides of a triangle change depending on what angle you are talking about, whether it's my beta angle here or this unknown angle up here. Okay, now specifically what we're going to do just for naming purposes is we're going to just talk about this beta angle. So the opposite side of this beta angle is this 5 right over here. Easy enough. And the adjacent is the one right next to it, right there. Okay? So if you remember from algebra, we had this great acronym, and it went SOHCAHTOA. All right, and SOHCAHTOA told us the trigonometry ratios um, in just a really quick acronym. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on this last part, the TOA part. All right, and this TOA part is actually telling us our ratio, which is opposite over adjacent. So the opposite in this particular triangle is 5, and the adjacent is 12. So my ratio for the tangent of my beta angle is 5 over 12. All right, easy enough. Now, you can do this depending on what angle you're talking about. So for example, if I was talking about, we'll find the tangent of this other angle up here, excuse me, suddenly my opposite and my adjacent interchange. So now my trigonometry ratio is going to be 12 over 5. All right, so just so you guys can see the difference there. All right, now with this information, we can actually use that to find unknown sides in a triangle. We know what the angle is, we know what the one side is, but we're trying to find the other one. Well, immediately when you see this problem, you should notice we are definitely talking about tangent because we're talking about an adjacent side and an opposite side. The hypotenuse has nothing to do with this particular problem, so we just don't even need to worry about it. All right, so then I'm going to say tangent of my 5-degree angle is equal to my opposite, which is 240, over my adjacent, which in this case is x. Now we need to just solve for x. So we can actually, algebraically, we can just say tangent, or x is now going to equal 240 divided by tangent of 5. And if you need help on how I got to that point, I think you guys can figure it out, but if you do need help, just ask me tomorrow in class. Basically, I just multiplied this up here and divided that down there. Easy enough, okay? Now, using your calculator, this is a chapter where you're going to need a calculator specifically because we physically can't just figure out the tangent of 5 without it being a big old mess, and we don't want to create big old messes, so trying to keep it as simple as possible. So what you're going to do then is you're going to type into your calculator 240 divided by, press that tangent button, a little thing will pop up with half parenthesis, you're going to put in the angle measurement, which is 5 in this case. Close our parentheses, hit equal, and you should get an answer, okay? So in this case, we have it equals 2,743.21. All right, so that would be your answer in this particular case. So this entire side would be 2,743.21 feet. All right. All right, so this should have been a semi-review for you. This should have been pretty obvious. But what I'm going to throw at you now is not so much a review. It's actually going to, we're actually going to talk about something called the inverse of tangent. All right, and the inverse of tangent you use when we want to know an unknown angle. We know all the sides of the measurement, but we want to know what angle x equals to. So in this particular problem, we're going to try and find out what angle x is. And we're going to use that using the inverse of tangent. Now when I talk about the inverse of tangent, if you look on your calculator, we have this nice fancy tangent button. And if you look right above that tangent button, there should be a little symbol that looks like tan minus 1. And you get to it by second, and then you hit the tangent button, and it should come up. All right, so this is the inverse of tangent. And what this is going to help us do is it's actually going to help us go the opposite way. It's going to help us go the inverse, okay? So we know that if I'm trying to solve for the angle of x, I need to figure out my tangent ratio first. So my opposite over my adjacent, which is 6/8, and that's going to be equal to my tangent, my inverse of tangent of x. All right, we don't know what it is. Sorry, we're just going to do tangent of x is that ratio. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, so then we know that 6/8 is actually 0.75. All right, so in this case, what we can do is we can do the inverse of tangent of 0.75. So then all of a sudden my x is going to equal tangent -1 times 0.75. Now, the reason I turn it into a decimal is just to make typing it in a little easier. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say second, my inverse of tangent, 0.75, close the parentheses, and I got 36.87. So the measurement of angle x is 36.87 degrees. All right. So please let me know if you have any questions about how to use that inverse of tangent button and how to solve for an unknown angle measurement, knowing the tangent ratio. All right. So that's all I have for you today. Please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a good evening.